Hello! It's raining today whilst I'm out in town, and I'm going to tell you about the new town. So most of the time I've been exploring the old town whenever I've done a video, but the new town is beautiful, and I'm sure that probably most of you visiting for the first time will have no idea what the new town is when you hear locals talk about it. So I thought it was a good plan. Oh, by the way, it's raining, hence me being underneath an umbrella, because I've just bought a new camera and I don't want it to get ruined by the rain. And this sort of rain that is today, this is the kind of rain you should probably expect. Just a constant, slow drizzle, dreek. Anyway, in the 1750s, the Council of Edinburgh decided that they needed to expand, because Edinburgh essentially was mostly just the old town, what we know as the old town, but it was the Royal Mile, Grassmarket, Cowgate, stuff I've showed you before. And they said, well, we need to grow, we need to expand, because they wanted to start competing with other major capital cities. London, Paris, Rome, they wanted to start competing for business with these big cities, so that's what they did. Start of that plan was drain the Norloch, which is where I'm standing right now, which is now Princes Street Gardens. So that was part one. That started in the 1750s. They started to drain the Norloch, and they started to build the North Bridge, which opened up the Royal Mile down to what would become the new town over the Norloch. They then held a competition to design the new town. Now the competition was won by a guy called James Craig. He was in his 20s, he was a relatively unknown architect. Well, I say relatively, he was an unknown architect. And he'd won on this simple axle grid design of Edinburgh. That won the competition. There was other architects came in and helped him tweak it just a little bit, but that was the initial design. Now the new town's actually bigger than what that initial architectural picture looks like, but that is what I'm going to show you today, roughly, just that little original design. So, first off, obviously there was a North Bridge leading down to it, and the first bit you hit is Princes Street. Now, Princes Street was named, the king at the time was King George, King George III. He had two sons, and that is what Princes Street was named after. It's not Princess Street, it's Princes Street, two princes. And this here is Princes Street, going from just down there. You see that big thing in the distance there? Remember that when I went up Calton Hill? Starting down there, all the way down for roughly, again it's roughly about a mile, and it is the main shopping street. And if you ever come here and you're doing your shopping and you're walking along Princes Street and you're all going to all these high street brands, you can look across the road and be looking at a castle. Next up, halfway up the sort of square section, the second main road, is George Street. This is George Street. You see all these beautiful, beautiful design buildings. Now George Street was named after the king at the time, King George. You might be starting to see a theme here. We've got Princes Street named after the king's two sons, George Street named after the king. Can you get what the next main street will be called? I should say as well that George Street is full of your more higher end shops. Princes Street is more your big high street brand names. George Street is more of your upper, higher expensive shops. And this is the last street, completing that sort of gridded section. This is, did you guess the name? Queen Street. Imaginatively named there, isn't it? And that kind of finishes off the main grid of that original sort of design, or at least the big main streets of it. That's the three main streets. The three cross-section streets that cut them up are Hanover Street, which is the one we're on right now, leading from Queen Street, crossing George Street and down to Princes Street. Frederick Street in the middle here, again, much like Hanover Street, it's mostly restaurants and little shops. Lastly, Castle Street. Castle Street goes from Princes Street over George Street and heads down towards Queen Street. Now, kind of continuing with the theme of naming them, Frederick Street was named after the king's dad at the time. His name was Frederick, obviously. Hanover Street was the royal family name. Like nowadays how the royal family name is Windsor, the House of Windsor, they were the House of Hanover, so that was called Hanover. Castle Street was named Castle Street because when you're standing on it, you get a stunning view of the castle. So, that's sort of the main streets on there, and that's the first theme of the naming of them all, kind of the royal family. There are other parts that have another theme for their naming. The second theme was, when they came up with this design, or the idea to expand, it was the 1750s. In 1707, the Act of Union had happened. Now, the Act of Union is what joined Scotland to England and Wales to make the United Kingdom. So, in a spirit of union, that was the theme of naming of the other streets. Queen Street is bookended either side by squares. On one end, St Andrew Square, named after the patron saint of Scotland. And on the other end, Charlotte Square. Now, for any of you trying to figure out the theme there, obviously St Andrew Square, like I said, named after the patron saint of Scotland. Charlotte Square was actually renamed after the King's wife and first daughter, whose names were both Charlotte. However, in the original design for this square, it was called St George's Square. St George being the patron saint of England. The reason they changed it is because they had a George Square on another part of the design and they didn't want people to get confused. So, although it was supposed to be originally named after the patron saint of England to mirror the patron saint of Scotland, to save confusion, it got changed to be named after the Queen and her daughter. Running parallel in between Prince Street, George Street and Queen Street, we have this street here. This one's Rose Street, named after the national flower of England. Rose Street is well known, apart from having little restaurants and cool little shops, for pubs. It has a lot of pubs, and many people have tried to start at one end and go in every pub all the way along and have a pint, and many have failed. And lastly, continuing on the theme of, a shared union, Rose Street runs parallel between Princess Street and George Street. This is Thistle Street, running parallel between George Street and Queen Street. Now, Thistle Street doesn't look as nice, but it's one of these streets that you have to come down and take a wander, because it's got lots of beautiful little hidden restaurants and things like that. So it might not look as glamorous as the others, but come down, take a wander down here. And that, guys, kind of brings us to the end of a wee explore of the new town. Obviously, I only did the original design of the new town. There's a lot more. There's the West End, there's down at Stockbridge and everything like that. I adjusted the original design. But I keep cutting off my head in this new camera. But hopefully that's given you an idea of places to go. Do come to the new town, do explore it. I know you're going to go to the old town, it is great obviously, but come to the new town, there's lots of cool things to see, cool shops, cool restaurants, beautiful buildings. And that's kind of it, guys. Please remember, subscribe, share, if you don't mind, like the video, that'd be great. Until next time, bye humans.